had some sort of collaboration, and that was to be covered.
What was their assignment in the building, sir?
I cannot comment. I'd be remiss not
Were they assigned to be in the building?
I can't
What were
comment.
the qualifications of the people assigned to or around the building? ESU guys, SWAT guys, long
defer.
guns, good tactics?
They would be, as the name implies, but I defer to their exact training. I'm not aware of it specifically.
But your understanding is through the duration of the incident to at least the first shots fired, they were entirely within the building, not on the building, sir?
I don't 100% want to say where they are, where they were the entire period.
But you don't have an understanding as to whether they were assigned to be in the building or on top of it?
I don't. I would need to see the Secret Service operations plan.
And would that have been left to the discretion of state and local, or would that have been left to the discretion of the Secret Service? It sounds like you're saying that would have been left to the discretion of the Secret Service.
I would say it's the Secret Service as the lead agency, just like they told us. Here's the post we want you to staff. This is the motorcade we want. I would defer to the Secret Service.
Thanks, Colonel. When in Butler yesterday, we asked the question, why weren't the two well-qualified ESU officers on top of the building rather than in it? And what would you say if we were told the explanation is, well, it was a hot day in Butler and there was air conditioning inside the building and not on the building? What would be your reaction to that assertion, Colonel?
I can't respond to it. I have no firsthand knowledge about it.
Was it a hot day in Butler that day?
I believe it was a warm day, yes, sir.
But you have no knowledge of whether or not the Secret Service or anybody else assigned these two officers to be in the building and not on it?
No, sir.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields, and we're going to go out of order because Mr. Luttrell has to get to his committee, so you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you pull the video back up, please? Just for clarification, that is the exact point where the shooter was positioned, correct? Looking through that window in proximity to, if you give a range fan, if you were to expose yourself outside that window, is that the shooter's position? No? In relation to that video, where is the shooter's position at? Just further on the left side. And Mr. Paris, can you clarify something? There were ESU agents internal to the building or in proximity to the building in that location, correct?
I don't know to that specific location, but they were assigned to the AGR building.
And once the call went out that you had a bad actor in, the agents in the building left their position to try to find that individual?
My understanding is he was on the ground moving around the perimeter, and they moved to actively aid in the search along with additional municipal officers who were.
Does it make sense that ESU agents would be positioned inside the windows so they'd have a better vantage point out into where the X is, where the asset is located?
Could you ask that question again,
It makes sense to me that the ESU agents would be positioned in these windows, the windows that they're talking about in this building, so they could have better eyes on the asset, the president, instead of internal to the building milling about. Is that a fair assessment?
I'm remiss because I don't know what the conversation was and what the responsibilities delineated.
I think my concern is if we did have agents, let's just speak hypothetically here, if agents were positioned in these windows in order to provide protection for the asset, and then they were released, and I'm assuming they work in pairs, correct? There's only two of them, or is there four of them in the building? Do we know the answer?
From my briefings, there were two.
There were two. But to me, it would make sense that one would stay behind in order to cover the X, or cover the asset, and then one would engage in activity to find the actor that they were trying to identify, correct? I think my concern is the individuals may, and I hate to say this out loud, but if we didn't do due justice and we left that asset exposed because both ESU agents went to look for a bad actor, we just gave the shooter a bowling alley.
I don't know what their responsibilities and their rules of engagement were, not having seen the Secret Service operations plan. And I'm reluctant to speculate at this point, 10 days out, sir. I would rely on the reviews yet to come.
When it comes to Secret Service, talk comms matrix here real quick. When it comes to Secret Service and the local law enforcement, the state law enforcement, I understand that they are housed in the same, is there a common communication channel? And if so, does each agent and each officer that's working the event have, and I'm going to use old terminology, do they have an avalanche call? Do they have a no joy? When they see something that raises the red flag, can any officer radio in, go, no, go? We are not, hold the asset in place. We have somebody that we're looking for. And if they do or if they don't, how many people does that have to go through to get to the right actor in order to say stop?
I don't know.
Okay, we need to figure that out. Because if I'm an ESU agent in this window and I have to radio a person who has to radio somebody, who has to radio somebody else to get to the main person, then to call it, the dishes are done.
I'm aware of 3 radio systems in operation, PSPs, the Secret Service, and Butler counties.
All communicating on different channels.
Technically, yes, but the integration occurs, I can only speak from PSP, our integration occurs by us having somebody inside of the Secret Service command post. Again, for an incident of this magnitude, in theory, the more people you have on the same channel, if there was a medical emergency or lost 6-year-old and everybody keys up at once, it paralyzes your communication.
I understand that, but if there's one specific channel that you can go to call an avalanche and say, which is freeze the asset, I think that would be necessary. Now, you mentioned something earlier. You guys have done about 20 events this year in Pennsylvania. So, and you spoke, it's common. Now, the military folks in this room are going to understand this. The first month of deployment and the last month of deployment are the most dangerous times to be in combat. One, because you get there the first month, you have no idea what's going on, and then you're there and you get common. You get complacent. And before you leave, that last month, situational awareness kind of dies down a little bit, and that's when bad things happen. There's absolutely nothing common in protecting a president, ever. And as we move forward, I don't want that to be a term that we use, because common just got our president, our former president, shot. And if these assets would have been on high alert, and I'm not saying that they weren't, but when things become common, we get complacent.
I've instructed our commanders moving forward, if there is any, my expectation would be that through the collaboration and the planning of these events, you want more people there, you want people voicing issues and everybody operating on the same page in a unified command. But I have instructed our commanders, the ops plans get reviewed prior to this, up through our Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Lieutenant Colonel Bivens, seated here behind me today. But as a result of this, if there are any issues that our people see, we are ordering them to flag them, and we'll work collaboratively moving forward for the remainder of the season and moving forward.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields. And our witnesses, at any point where we're going to probably go at least another hour here, if you need to take a break, just let me know and just give me the high sign or a thumbs up. Y'all are okay right now? Are you?
Yeah, we can take a break.
Take a break? All right, we'll do 5 minutes and 5 minutes only. The restroom's right down the hallway to your right. Adjourn.
Thank you. I was just having the same thought.
Order. I now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Menendez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for appearing here today. I just want to join my colleagues in remembering our colleague, Sheila Jackson-Lee. She was incredible at this job. She was brilliant. She was tenacious. She was tough, but she cared about her district, cared about this country. And perhaps my favorite thing was her taking the 5-minute clock as a recommendation as opposed to a hard set time. But to the matter today, I just want to ask Colonel Parrish, how many times have you worked with the Secret Service on events like this in Pennsylvania?
So year to date, we're in the low 20s.
So low 20s just this year.
Yes, in an average year, it's about the same number, but given the election year, there's more.
And I'm sorry for not knowing this, but in your entire career, that would make it roughly how many times?
Dozens, I would say.
Okay. And do you find that there's, for each event, despite whether it's in Philadelphia or Butler, a standard process and set of procedures that are followed every single time?
In terms of the planning
The
of it?
consistency of the planning of the event?
Yes, I would say there is a consistency of the planning based on my experience, yes.
Not much variation. There is a set plan that the Secret Service administers with its state, county, and local partners.
That's been my experience, yes, sir.
Was there any change or deviation in
Not
this
to my
time?
knowledge.
Okay. I benefit from so many of my colleagues on this committee who served in law enforcement, served in our military. I did not. I want to ask you a question. From the time that a law enforcement officer was hoisted up, was identified by the shooter turns his rifle on him, how long between that encounter and the first shot?
So I'm glad you asked me that question, Congressman. I'd like to clarify. So it was a matter of seconds.
Okay. Because I think earlier it might have been minutes.
Correct, and I appreciate you asking that question and allowing me to clarify it on the record. When I assigned that number, which again, I don't want to get locked into a timeline of 3 minutes before, that's probably a total amount of time that he was on the roof. When the one local officer hoisted the other one up and subsequently falls, releases himself after being faced with that
Shooter
deadly
shuffles
threat.
across the roof, takes his first
He's already, I believe, close to being in his final position there.
Okay.
And I'm told it's, again, sequence of events, not a timeline based on the prior criteria laid out, but seconds after that is when the first shots rang out.
That's helpful, and the chairman and I were conferring on that because it would have been there's many failures on that day, but it would have been a critical failure if a gunman had turned his rifle on law enforcement and no one had pulled the president off the stage if it was a matter of minutes, but seconds.
Thank you for allowing me to clarify.
No, of course, and thank you for answering the question. Just going back to the general process that you've seen over your distinguished career, were there any specific challenges that you and your team faced during this event?
None of which I'm aware, to my knowledge. The planning on the PSP side, as per our interface with the Secret Service, was routine.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that that in your experience and the standard protocol, a Secret Service engages with its state, county, and local partners. They have a plan. They work with their partners to implement the plan in the lead up to the event and the day of the event. Is there an opportunity for the state, county, and local partners to provide input, given that they have more familiarity with the area? Butler Police, you yourself have more familiarity with the area. Is there an opportunity for you to provide any feedback to the plan that the Secret Service comes to you with?
In my past experience, yes. And in my past experience, I found the Secret Service very open and collaborative. We enjoy a very strong working relationship with them. And again, there's that fine line where the deference is that they're the top comm under a unified command. It's their incident. But certainly we would endeavor to give them any local nuance that would make the planning more successful and more safe.
I appreciate that. One of the things we touched on multiple times today is the multiple lines of communication, 3 different signals that were being used, a command center. In your experience working with the Secret Service, have you seen a better implementation of a more streamlined communication setup that allows the different actors the local PD, the county PD, the state police, to directly communicate to the command center, and then once there's a clear chain of command?
I have not. The Secret Service comms is a very complex operation because of the worldwide environment in which they work. I'm in no way an expert in it. I think from the state and local perspective, our job is to try and integrate communications, and it doesn't have to be a super high-tech solution. We have people who can get a message, turn over their shoulder, and report verbally. We have radios that we can exchange, or we have a trooper with a radio assigned to another partner, be that a federal partner or a municipal partner, and those two radio communication systems can interface because of the human interaction.
And I'll wrap up real quickly, Mr. Chair. And it sort of makes sense in a way because you're going to have people doing traffic. They're going to, folks who you mentioned, a child went missing. You could have a firecracker. You could have a multiple number of things that don't need to rise up, which is why some level of siloing makes sense. But we need to look at how we make it a clearer chain of communication to ensure that really important pieces of information, like identifying the shooter on the roof, doesn't get delayed in moving through those channels. So thank you both for appearing today. Thank you both for your service, and thank you, Chair. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Congressman Ezell for his 5 minutes of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, we also want to thank all of you for being here today and for Speaker Johnson for putting together a bipartisan task force to try to, so we can get as much information and find out what happened here. Today's conversations regarding the attempted assassination of former President Trump is a critical one that I pray never happens again. Throughout my law enforcement career, I held many leadership positions, and through those roles, I've coordinated with the White House, advanced teams, state and local law enforcement, and doing some of these very same similar type events. And we have one goal in mind, and that's to keep people safe. Because of a massive failure in communication, President Trump was shot from a little more than a football field away. And because of the failure of former Secret Service leadership, especially the former director, spectators were forced to do what the Secret Service failed to do, and that was protect themselves from bullets. Ultimately, this led to the death of Corey Comparator, who gave his life while bravely shielding his wife and children during this terrible thing. Colonel, thank you for being here today, and I've said from the beginning, if you want answers, you got to talk to the men and women who were on the ground, the law enforcement officers who were out there, and who were taking directions and commands from the leadership of Secret Service and various other leaders. You testified that 32 members of PSP were assigned to various roles to assist the Secret Service. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
Your officers were assigned to various roles, but they were not responsible for securing the building or property at AGR. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
The former director testified yesterday that the building was outside the Secret Service secured perimeter. Did the U.S. Secret Service leadership direct local or state police that was their job to secure the building? And if so, did they provide any guidance on this?
So as I stated earlier, aside from the briefing that I received about the walkthrough, when the question was raised and the response from the advance team of the Secret Service, the agents on the pre-plan, that was going to be the responsibility of Butler ESU. I have no firsthand knowledge about any interaction between the Secret Service and any other entity, really.
The Secret Service established and managed the primary command post for communications in the office of the Butler Farm Show. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, sir, yes.
Preliminary findings have concluded that communications were siloed and local law enforcement were not in frequent radio contact directly with the Secret Service. Local SWAT and sniper teams were on a separate radio channels from patrol. Colonel, do your radios have the capability to be programmed to be in contact with other agencies? And do you know if the officers on the ground that day had communication capabilities with the Secret Service that was on that duty that day?
You're asking me a very specific question that I would defer to our Bureau of Communication and Information Services. I can get you an answer as to what those specific capabilities were.
Do you know if the Secret Service provided any guidance on combined communications?
I do not, again, I have not seen their operations plan.
At 5:45 p.m., a local law enforcement sniper observed the suspect with a rangefinder and reported the suspect to command and the U.S. Secret Service. Colonel, how would you have responded to that information?
So again, I certainly wouldn't articulate that at that point, a rangefinder, which could have legal and legitimate use, that is a threat, but it's certainly a highly suspicious activity that should be addressed.
Exactly. Mr. Woes, you testified clear and constant communication is crucial to ensure the security of the protectee, and that local law enforcement should be part of the command post to facilitate real-time information sharing and rapid response to emerging situations. As we all know, separate communications are necessary and effective during a large-scale event like this. There's no way everybody can be on the same channel. You talk over each other, you won't ever get anything done. But there must be some clear understandings through communications at the beginning so that split-second decisions can be made so there won't be a lapse in time and these terrible things happen. Would you like to just say a few words about that?
Sir, there's no doubt when you look at how many people are involved in an operation like this, having everyone on one channel is difficult. But there are people within contained areas, and their ability to be able to communicate as things change across platforms is crucial. In this case, we know that in seconds things unfolded, and in seconds, getting meaningful communication out to people who might be able to act on that communication is vital. So I think there's avenues here. I agree that not everyone should be on the same channel, but there are certain people within certain areas and perimeters that should be having communication or the ability to communicate a little more freer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. D'Esposito, representing the New York law enforcement community as well, for 5 minutes of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. Thank you both for your service. On July 13th, we witnessed the Secret Service fail to secure a Pennsylvania field and keep the former president of the United States of America and the Americans that were gathered there safe. While President Trump thankfully survived this horrific attack, Corey Compatore, a volunteer fire chief, a father, and a husband died while shielding his family from the assassin's bullets. Two others, David Dutch and James Copenhaver, were both struck by bullets and are still recovering. The Secret Service failed. Quite frankly, they failed miserably. And Colonel Paris, Mr. Yos, Mr. Ezel, myself, we could probably combine our law enforcement experience and have no question that there was failures that day. We could probably ask someone who just graduated from a police academy or a veteran with 40 years on the job, and they would agree. So my first question is to Colonel Paris. I know that you mentioned over the last year you've had close to 20 interactions with the Secret Service and visits. During his presidency, Pennsylvania has been the second most visited state by President Biden. If you could go over again, what is your coordination with the Secret Service? What does it normally look like ahead of a visit from the President of the United States?
So I would say the basic timeline is the same. We are notified at some point that there's going to be a visit of a protectee or the president and everybody in between. The venue is ultimately secured, the logistics, and then there's planning at the request of the Secret Service, and our default position is to attempt to partner and give them all the support that we can.
Okay. Now, I know that Mr. Menendez had similar questions, but I just want to reiterate because I think it's critically important. Of the dozens of times that you've dealt with visits from the President of the United States, and I'm sure you've thought about this dozens and dozens of times at this point, and read through emails and thought about different incidents, compared to the incident on July 13th, was there anything different from the way that this was handled?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Okay. So at approximately 5:51 p.m., Pennsylvania State Police notified the Secret Service of a subject with a rangefinder. That was 20 minutes before the gunman shot President Trump and 2 others. This is for either one of you. What should have happened next?
So ideally, I would say that Mr. Crooks could have been encountered and intercepted. That would have been the ideal.
Mr. Yos?
Well, I have no direct knowledge. I want to make that clear, but I think also you need to assess the threat and determine whether there's a need to withhold the asset from the stage.
So I think we all know what should have happened, right? 20 minutes passed. There was someone who eventually took a shot at a former president of the United States and killed 2 innocent Americans. So we know what did happen. We know what should have happened. What do you say to those that are saying that local law enforcement failed to provide adequate security at this rally?
As I stated earlier, based on everything I know up until day 10, I only am going to comment on the Pennsylvania State Police, and it's my belief as I sit here, based on all the information that I have, that we met or exceeded our expectations for that event. Am I saying that the event was a success? Obviously, it was not, and our hearts go out to those affected.
Mr. Yos.
I will echo the fact that that local law enforcement plays a huge role and must. I don't think the federal agencies have the ability to be, with bandwidth, to be able to have this event without coordinated effort with local law enforcement. To my knowledge, local law enforcement did what their responsibilities and directions were.
And Mr. Yos, we've corresponded about this prior, but I just want to, in the last 20 seconds I have, the United States Secret Service established and managed the primary command post. Would you agree, Colonel, that in the United States of America, we have a serious issue when it comes to law enforcement and communicating through multiple jurisdictions and agencies at a singular event?
I would say the short answer is it depends, but communications are always a critical piece to any successful operation.
So I agree it does depend, but I do have a concern when some people's lives are on the lines, when we are supposed to be protecting an asset regardless of who it is, but especially someone who was it was the President of the United States. The fact that law enforcement agencies are communicating at such a critical time via text message is a problem. And it's one that I think this committee and other committees need to take a real hard look at. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Strong for 5 minutes question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. I think we all agree that none of us ever wanted to be holding a hearing like this. As we have covered, the Secret Service relies on federal, state, and local partners to coordinate and secure events to ensure the safety of its protectee. As both of you rightly emphasized in your testimony, Secret Service is the ultimate responsible and the final arbiter of any and all security matters affecting their protectee, full stop. Mr. Yos, you also went on to highlight the importance of mutual respect, trust, and shared commitment in the relationship between Secret Service, the state, and locals. I was pleased to learn that Director Cheatle has tendered her resignation. This is the first time we have seen real accountability from the director following July the 13th. It is my hope the truth will now come. Her lack of leadership following the assassination attempt has not only impeded the ongoing investigation and eroded the public's trust, but it has also the potential to erode the mutual respect and trust that are fundamental to this relationship between the Secret Service and partners they rely on. Colonel Paris, I understand that state and locals were the ones that first alerted the command center of a suspicious individual some 20 minutes before he started shooting. Is that correct?
As I said before, I would agree with the sequence of events, but I don't want to go on the record with the exact time. So that's my understanding of the sequence of events. Yes.
Does the Pennsylvania State Police use a digital radio system, whether it be the P25 or something of that nature?
Yes, we do.
and it has unbelievable technology. I know we've utilized it throughout the state of Alabama, 40 years and as a first responder. To go from UHF, VHF to a digital system changes the ball game. Does the Secret Service also use a digital radio system?
I would have to get you information on that. I don't know, sir.
Okay, so the communication between the agencies, you start looking at it, the communication with a digital radio system, you can change frequencies, you can make a mutual frequency. Every radio you can have hundreds of different frequencies, but as far as you're not sure if they have a digital radio system or if they're using another conventional UHF or VHF frequency or something of that nature.
In answer to the first part, I'm not an expert on radios. I can't render an opinion on what their system is, but the only answer I would provide is my understanding is there are certain encrypted capabilities that the Secret Service has to maintain that may provide difficulty in what would otherwise be if we had a regular incident and we were able to set up a patch to communicate across agencies.
Thank you. Colonel Paris, as you just shared, after state and locals identified the shooter as suspicious, they relayed that information to Secret Service and were given a number to send their concerns to. Is this standard operating procedures to be left a phone number to give your information to rather than direct communications through radio?
I don't want to say that it's standard operating procedure, but if it was a system that, or a measure that worked to push that information to the people who needed it in the most expeditious means, I wouldn't be averse to going away from standard protocols.
You said that you had done this type of event with other presidents or in your state. In past history, is this how it usually was done?
I can't say that I have had a personal experience about, I've obviously been present when there were suspicious people that came out over the radio and law enforcement was seeking them, but I can't say that I have a frame of reference exactly on point here, sir.
Did the Secret Service provide rules of engagement for state and locals? Did y'all have to authorize a green light for fire, or do you go by your day-to-day activity where we
would go by the policy and regulations and state law that cover the Pennsylvania State Police.
Another thing that stood out to me with a background in emergency medical services is when the president was brought off, you saw his SUV move about 20 feet, and then it sat there. We watched as a lady in a skirt walked in front of the SUV. We watched as other law enforcement, people, spectators, whatever. Did you notice that seemed to be a long time for the president to be sitting for someone that had taken a bullet? Did you think that was a long time?
I would completely defer to the Secret Service.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Crane for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like the staff to go ahead and play the video that I took at the site yesterday.
All right, guys, I'm up here on the building where the supposed sniper took his shot. It's not that steep at all. We just had a 70-year-old man back here climb up on the roof easily. See that water tower behind me? Had Secret Service or anybody had sniper teams up there, this guy wouldn't have made it 5 feet up this roof. He would have been taken out. Behind me, you see the windows that Secret Service was supposedly in the second floor of this building behind. Makes you wonder why they weren't able to quickly dispatch the individual. And then behind me, back over here where those red roofs are, that's where the—
Can you guys cut it right there, please?
The president was giving his speech from. A lot of questions here in Butler.
Cut it. Thank you. All right, Colonel Paris, did you notice when you showed up on site what the tallest structure on the site was?
I can't say at the moment that I arrived that I did, no, sir.
Okay. Now that you've had a chance to go back and look over it, what is the tallest structure on that site?
The water tower, sir.
Absolutely. Colonel, do you know how far the water tower was from the roof where the shooter took his shots?
I do not.
160 yards, sir. Who made the decision, Colonel, not to put a counter-sniper team on the tallest structure by far on the site with 360-degree surveillance? Do you have any idea?
I do not know, sir.
Okay, we'd like to get that answer. Did you see the video that showed me sticking my phone out the second-story window? Did you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, exposing the coverage of the window of the entire roof. Are you aware that local law enforcement and Secret Service had full access to that building in that room?
My understanding is that they did.
Yeah. Why weren't security teams, sir, on site able to spot a 20-year-old kid with zero camouflage crawling up a white roof with an AR-15 that several rally goers were screaming and yelling and pointing out, and they noticed him, and they weren't even there to conduct security. They were there to watch the president. Do you have any idea why the security teams couldn't find that guy?
I do not, sir.
Would the gentleman yield for just a second on that? So just for clarification, it was the ESU guys that were manning those buildings?
Yep.
And they left because of the call of the suspicious person, so they left their post there to go look for him. They're the same individuals who attempted to climb up the building and were scared away by the shooter pointing the gun, right?
I reclaim my time. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just wondering why they weren't able to find him, because even while they were looking, they could have still looked out that window that they had access to. All right, Colonel Paris, I'm just going to say it. Are you aware, sir, that many Americans believe this was very likely not a lone shooter, but a coordinated assassination attempt? Have you been getting those messages from people like I have?
I have not, sir.
You haven't? Well, there's a lot of people in this room that have been getting the same messages. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that a lot of Americans are like, this doesn't add up, this doesn't make sense, guys? How could this many things have gone wrong, right? Like the things I pointed out, a 20-year-old kid got 150 yards of the President of the United States with an AR-15, flew a drone to conduct site surveillance, was spotted with a rangefinder ranging targets, then lost, had advanced explosive devices on him with no military training. Nobody was placed in the most obvious spot to conduct counter-sniper operations. I was a sniper in the SEAL teams, Colonel. As soon as I got out of the SUV and I saw that water tower, I was like, that's exactly where I'd be. Put me right there. So obvious. After partisan attempts to bankrupt him, imprison him for 750 years, and countless depictions as a modern-day Hitler, are you surprised, sir, that a lot of Americans are like, maybe there's more to this story?
I wouldn't begin to speculate about what the American people think, sir.
Colonel, did your team make entry and conduct investigation at the suspect's home prior to this shooting?
Excuse me, sir? I asked that question.
Did your team make entry and conduct any investigation at the suspect's home?
I believe we had people that participated in that securing of it. There were bomb assets that we provided.
Mr. Chairman, can I have 30 more seconds?
Yeah, I'm letting everybody kind of.
Okay.
On the night of. Since then, none.
Did you get any reports from any of your agents of anything fishy at the home?
I was briefed on.
Was there any silverware found in the home or trash?
I have nothing in the briefing that I was given, sir.
Was it extremely clean, almost like a medical lab? Were you given any of those reports?
I was not giving any of those details, sir.
Okay, that's what I'm hearing. Interesting. The last thing I want to enter into the record, Mr. Chairman, this is article, opinion from, I believe, the Washington Post by Robert Kagan. A Trump dictatorship is increasingly inevitable. We should stop pretending. This article compares Trump to Caesar and attempts to justify the assassination of President Trump. And I think even though we want to dodge around it and not make this partisan, I think we all know that a lot of this has to do with the rhetoric, the very violent rhetoric that has led up to this. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields, and so ordered on the entry of that into the record. I now recognize Mr. Burkeen for 5 minutes of testimony, or witness questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alexander, would you mind moving that just a little bit forward here so I can... Colonel Paris, can you see that, or am I obstructing your view?
I believe I can see it, sir.
Alexander, would you mind? I'm sorry. Can we shift it just a little bit to your left, Alexander? There we go. Okay. Better?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is a picture I took yesterday on the grounds, looking out of that second-story window that has the corridor that connects the AGR building, the American Glass Research Building, with where the shooter's location, And I'm going to stand up and I'm going to point to the shooter's location as we were made aware. From that X is where the shooter was shared with us. His body was found. From this viewpoint, there's some videos that make it look like he's more this direction, but from the perception, it kind of is confusing. But he was more towards that opposite side. This window, second story, it's the second window from the right side. That window has this view where they could clearly, those ESU officers that were stationed, given access by the property owner to that window, could see the shooter had they stayed in that man position. This is there moving towards the location of President Trump with the red barns back here. His stage was right in front of that. And you can see a window here that is absolutely going to obstruct the view to be able to look to the 20 or 30 different barn structures, the cattle building, the sheep building, the hog building, the rodeo arena by the pond. The many structures, there's 50 buildings within a 500-yard radius of where President Trump was at. So many vulnerabilities. Do you see a problem with that window being in the way of someone being able from this position to be able to take care of the asset?
A casement window would present a tactical concern for full field.
And I understand potentially, this was air conditioning on top of this second-story building wasn't, and so maybe that was a consideration. But ultimately, Secret Service is the one who made the determination of placement or contacting or making sure the plan was in coordination with the property owner for gaining admittance from the property owner for this second-story window. Is that correct? That was Secret Service's plan.
Correct. Ultimately, it's on...
It's on Secret Service for that plan. All right. My question is, if it's their plan, did they not indicate that someone had to stay manned in that location? Because we're being told that when the two officers, local PD, were trying to lift themselves on the opposite side to get a look at the gentleman, and he turns his gun and they dropped off the building, this would have been a perfect opportunity. Someone would be on the radio. They could have taken him out from this location. Did the Secret Service plan not include directives from staying in those positions?
I don't know, sir.
You don't know. All right, here's another question. With the 2 minutes that you said that there was an opportunity from the time that they were hoisted up, looked at the shooter, you're given the responsibility, as this is delegated in the outer perimeter, to secure the area. Why weren't they able to immediately call their supervisor, who would then be authorized to issue a hold on the asset or a get him off the stage call? Why does it have to be, as your testimony says, they took a picture, sent it to Secret Service 20 minutes before the incident of the shooting, and they have to wait for a response? Why is not the line of communication? I understand they're on different radio frequencies. Why were they not empowered to say, if we send something suspicious, then state police, local law enforcement, sheriff's department, each one, the head official of each one of those departments, if we entrusted them with enough responsibility to secure that environment, then we ought to give them the responsibility to issue a hold call because of something that they see as a threat. Are they empowered to do that, or does it have to all go through Secret Service to issue a hold?
I can only say what I know about the state police operations plan, and I do not know the answer to your question, sir.
So
I do not know the answer. I don't know what the protocol would be to issue the hold order. And just as a point of clarification that I tried to clean up with the congressman from New Jersey before, when the two municipal officers one was hoisted.
Can I jump on that 2 to 3 minutes, because I got limited time here.
Just to make sure, that was seconds before. That was seconds before Crooks started firing.
Okay, you had said earlier today it was 2 to 3 minutes, but
sure
you're saying seconds
I cleaned that up
before.
for the second time. Yes, sir.
Okay. But even if they're hoisting, your testimony today, if I understood you correctly, it was 2 different officers that were hoisting to get a look at him, not the ones who were manned in this view.
That is my understanding, yes, sir.
Okay, so had they remained in there, they immediately would have seen the incident taking place if they were on the same line of communication, and they could have taken the asset out.
I'm remiss to say that because I don't know what their general rules of engagement and assignment were from the Secret Service.
It just looks to me like a major breakdown of communication. This procedure looks to me like it is lapsed with the ability of someone who, if they entrust them with the ability to secure these perimeter, they ought to be empowered enough to be able to give the authority on their comms issue a hold. I don't understand that. With that, I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields. And I'm going to say this because I have thoroughly enjoyed both of your testimony today. And there are a lot of guys up here on both sides of the aisle that are charged about this, that their emotion is not intended to communicate a lack of trust in the Pennsylvania State Police, or, I mean, you're being incredibly helpful today. Some of the things that we've discovered from your testimony have brought some frustration to our folks, and I hope you'll understand it in that context, that it's the energy is not directed at you. The failure to set up appropriate communication systems and to make decisions when they become aware of someone pointing a rangefinder is what's got people upset. And that's on Secret Service. So I just wanted to make sure y'all heard that from me.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I was amped up a little bit, I concur. So greatly respect what you're doing.
I now recognize Ms. Lee for 5 minutes of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing and for organizing this committee's trip to Butler, Pennsylvania. For us, being on the ground in Butler, Pennsylvania yesterday made clear the severity of the security failures on Saturday, July 13th. Those failures that almost allowed former President Donald Trump to be assassinated. Unfortunately, what has followed that failed assassination attempt is an erosion of public trust related to those responsible for keeping the president and the attendees of the rally safe. We've heard that because of a sloped roof, law enforcement was not able to safely secure the area that day. We've heard reports that certain officers abandoned their posts due to weather conditions. We've heard the Secret Service attempt to shift blame to state and local law enforcement, asserting that they failed to secure certain areas in the perimeter. Secret Service Chief Cheatle's resignation this morning is the first of many steps that need to be taken, and today's hearing is just the beginning of our process to get clear, accurate information about this issue, about the failures associated with that day, and ensure that not only Congress, but that the American public get the answers that they deserve about these events. Mr. Yoes, I'd like to start with you. The Secret Service is always the lead in providing security for these types of events that involve one of their protectees, but they clearly rely on their partnerships with state and local law enforcement as they move to different locations around the country. Are you concerned that former Director Cheatle's comments to ABC News, which many people heard as blame shifting to local law enforcement, could undermine the level of trust between state and local authorities and Secret Service when they come to communities around America?
Yes, I absolutely do, and our organization actually issued a press release stating just that. Our relationship, it's impossible for a federal agency to do their function without including local law enforcement. That's a given. And that relationship is built on trust. And when comments were made, like what made on ABC, then we felt the need to call her out on it.
And do you believe that the federal government's statements to the public, to the American people, after this attempted assassination have helped or harmed public trust in law enforcement overall?
You know, I'll say this. The very powers that we have, or the ability to do our job as law enforcement officers, is directly related to trust. And in an investigation, there's a fine line between what you do in order to protect an investigation and also be accountable to the public you serve. And when you don't walk that fine line, then it does create distrust. And it does cause a lot of confusion. It causes people to fill in their own blanks. And as a result, this is what we see. Sharing accurate information is important to keep everyone informed so that it doesn't run in different directions.
And as the American people wait for an after-action report, what can or should law enforcement agencies at any level be doing to address concerns about transparency and protect that public trust?
Well, I'll start right here. I mean, you have the Pennsylvania State Police. It filled in a lot of gaps that should have been filled in a long time ago. This is information that should be known to everyone. essential facts. It doesn't change. It is what it is, and sharing this information lets everyone know exactly what occurred and gives us some insight of things that we need to correct.
And you've been here now throughout this day, throughout questioning from a number of members of this committee. As this committee continues to investigate the failures that resulted in this shooting, what are some of the key questions that you believe should be asked about the assassination attempt, as well as the management and organization of Secret Service more broadly?
Well, again, I have to be upfront in the fact that I have no direct knowledge to this incident or things that unfold. I'll just speak in just general terms. The first question that I think we all need to ask is, with so many elevated positions available, what steps were taken to protect those assets? I don't know the answer to that, but there were a lot of places. I mean, we learned a lot of lessons going back to President Kennedy. Higher locations create unique problems, and as a result, they should have been part of any action plan. I'm not saying they weren't. I'm just saying that we see the end result of what happened here, so obviously we have a failure there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back and now recognize the gentleman in whose district this tragedy occurred, fine representative from Pennsylvania, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I appreciate Chairman Green's allowing me to be here, and then also to be in Butler yesterday, where it's my hometown. I'm 4 miles from this location. My concern actually started on July the 5th when I was told that former President Trump was coming to Butler, and I said, that's great. And they said, yeah, and he's going to be at the Butler Farm Show. I said, you must mean the big Butler Fair. They said, no, the Butler Farm Show. I said, who did a site visit? The answer is, we've already made our determination. My question then was, so then what you just told me is nobody's been to that site. I will just tell you right now that what you are planning there is not proper for the crowd that's going to show up. At that point, the person on the phone said, Mr. Kelly, there'll be 6,000 or 7,000 people there. I said, well, that tells me even more about the fact that you have no idea where you're going. And historically, what has happened whenever the President Trump had come to Butler, we got 55,000 people at that rally. And he said that was before, when he was president. He's no longer president. So being there, not only just myself, but also my wife, 3 of my grandchildren, and 1 of my sons, and so many friends that were there that day, I think it all comes down to the same question that we always ask when we get to these situations. What did we know, and when did we know it? And I think forever now, people are going to look at what happened and say, we knew there was something wrong. We could see it. I would just put to you that had we acted quicker, Mr. Compratore would still be alive today. President Trump would not have been wounded, and 2 other people who were that day would not have been wounded. And in a greater sense, the American people have been wounded in a way that they have lost faith, trust, and confidence in how we protect certain people. This goes far beyond that, and I appreciate you both being here, and I'll tell you what, you really have given us testimony based on what your whole careers have been about, and that is protecting people. For some reason, on July 13th, we knew something was wrong. Every person I've talked to that was there that day or responsible for protection says, we did our job. And I said, so then you're saying that somebody else didn't do their job? And the answer is, well, that's to be decided later on. So I would just say, first of all, I meant what I said. I think the American people now are deeply wounded, and the faith, trust, and confidence we need to have in our government has been fading for too long. I was there with the Pennsylvania State Police. I've talked to the Pennsylvania Police since then. Mr. Yost, thank you for your career. But at the end of the day, we don't have the answers we need to have. And I said it earlier, and I mean it. There is no reason for Corey Compratore to be dead today. There is no reason for President Trump to have been wounded, or 2 other members in the audience that day to have been wounded, had we done what we knew before we let it go any further than that. That could have been stopped early on. Nobody can convince me that when people see somebody on the roof of a house, of a building, and pointing to him and yelling, there's somebody up there, it needs to be taken care of. And other people who were there, that eyewitnesses said they watched him go onto those grounds, and every time they said there's something wrong, somebody is going in the wrong direction and shouldn't be there, and the answer comes down, you don't know what you're talking about. There's nobody there. So as we continue looking at this, and I think that we have a lot of testimony today, and again, I thank you for being there, but I just submit to you that the victims of that day, innocent people, none of it had to happen. We knew beforehand, and we could have prevented it, but we failed to act when we should have acted. So I appreciate your careers and everything you've done. And Chairman, I appreciate the fact that I've been able to be here today and that you came to our town yesterday, in a town that I have lived. This spot is a place I've been at many, many, many times. I just cannot understand why we didn't act when we knew there was something wrong. At the very least, they could have taken President Trump off the podium, and some of the other activity after that never would have taken place. So thank you for having me here, and thank you both. Colonel, Mr. Yost, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it, but there is far, far more we have to learn. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We're going to do another round of questioning, and I don't know, Mr. Gray, if you are going to want to ask any other questions. Or, I'll have a couple, okay, sir. Sounds good. So you'll follow me, and then we'll go around. I just want to get back to this text message that was sent at about 20 to 25 minutes prior. That text message was a picture of Crooks. Was it a picture of him pointing the rangefinder or of him just looking suspicious?
Chairman, I have not seen the picture that was sent, so I don't know.
But
my understanding is, to the best of my briefings, it was the pictures that were initially taken by Butler ESU.
Okay, so that was the 62-minute prior. Okay. At 20, 25 minutes prior, though, someone saw him pointing a rangefinder and taking range estimation or range readings, right?
I don't want to speculate as to what he actually was doing with the rangefinder, but the rangefinder, my understanding is, was the heightened suspicion. Yes, sir.
And he was pointing it. I mean, because a rangefinder, I guess you can have it digital and do it like this, but there are also rangefinders you look through and you have a reading. Do you know description of the rangefinder?
It was not briefed to me. I can't
okay. But there was concern, and that was relayed to the command post, and that was a PSP guy in the Secret Service command post via a text message 20-something minutes before, and you think it included the fact that the guy had a rangefinder?
My understanding is, yes.
Okay. Okay. Then you mentioned that the two ESU guys that were in the second story, in truth, to me, it appears to be a second building behind it that got joined by all these different, the breakup of that whole complex and the intricacies of, places to hide and move around, all the little alleyways, is because they built tunnelways, or not tunnels, but hallways that were covered between each of these different buildings. So it's actually a separate building with a amended. Connector. Yep. So there are two guys in that building. They leave to go look for the guy, the suspicious person.
My understanding is, yes, according to interviews.
So they were not manning, they did not have oversight on that rooftop because they were out looking for the guy.
Correct. My understanding is it was the grounds around there, to see it photographed now or on your tour yesterday, without scores of people traversing from different parking areas to make ingress into the secure perimeter, that there was a concerted effort to try and identify and make contact with him.
Sure.
In conjunction with other, I was briefed that there were two other suspicious individuals that simultaneous to this, not terribly too far away distance-wise. I don't have the specifics, but those, this is all occurring contemporaneously.
But one of them, Crooks, had a rangefinder, and so they leave and they go, look, he's suspicious. That leaves that building with two sets of eyes that could have observed it, granted, by exposing themselves. And by the way, I would think they could stay in the building as opposed to being on top of it for their own sort of defilade position. I get that as a sniper works, but you know, you got to be able to see it. So anyway, they leave. Did they note, was Secret Service notified that they were leaving to go look for this guy, and thus those eyes on top of the building not?
I do not know, and the other thing that I do not know is where else Butler ESU sent that information. I have not been briefed on that.
Who told them to go look? Do you know if they were told to go look?
I do not know, sir.
We just know that they did go look.
Yes, sir. And I said a very concerted effort with all of those alcoves and all of those buildings was made. There were 2 additional officers who, again, I don't know the specifics of the timeline. I don't know the specifics of the logistics of how that information was relayed, but I'm briefed that they came and they made a very concerted effort to try and locate crooks.
But it seems to me that that was leaving that extra set of eyes on top of the building. You know, it would be something if I were the site commander at that point, I'd want to know 2 guys are leaving a post where they have observation on a building, and that somebody relayed that to me so that I would know, oh, wait a minute, now 2 sets of eyes that were on the building. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you pull security, if you pull your lateral security in an ambush or something. I'm talking like an Army guy now. You know, the commander's going to know that guy's moved away from there and now he's got a blind spot, right? So I just want to make sure, I want to dig into that a little more. Obviously, you don't have the answer, so we'll dig elsewhere. But I find it interesting that they leave, this guy is so suspicious, has a rangefinder, they leave their post that they are manning to go look for him, yet Secret Service, and they get told about it 20 to 25 minutes beforehand, but Secret Service still lets the president go on the stage. I'm just totally blown away by that. But again, there's more details to be had. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over now to the ranking member for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Commissioner Paris, Mr. Yost, we're looking at a rearview mirror of what happened. A lot of good questions from both sides of the aisle. Commissioner Paris, you don't have the luxury of time. You're protecting governor, and you'll be protecting high-profile candidates in your battleground state, like right about now. I'm trying to figure out how we help you do your job a whole lot better. Mr. Kelly, his line of questioning was interesting, and I considered it important because that's his background, that's his backyard. And he asked, who decided the site of the event? It's a good question. Bigger question is, who okays, who approves the site of an event? And I come back to what I said earlier, which is one of those officers on the ground said, Lou, he said, who's in charge? The Secret Service says good or bad. Does the campaign then say good or bad, or does the campaign have the ability to override the Secret Service at an event? And I ask this question from you, Commissioner Paris, you're going to have to make these decisions here real soon. Because if I'm here where you're at today you've learned some lessons. The 13th to today, we've all learned some lessons, and you have to execute, sir. And it's not your responsibility. It's not our responsibility. It's all of us, our responsibility. And I want to know how we can help you clarify these lines of command, so to speak, to make sure that we minimize the possibilities of this happening again. Who makes the decisions? Who's in charge? What are the lessons we've learned today, gentlemen? Sir, what is it that we can do to make sure that it's not going to be on your shoulders? You're not going to be able to resign. You have to execute, please.
I appreciate your comments very much. I can say that through the governor and the legislature in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we are very supported, and we have the resources, I believe, moving forward. to rise to the occasion. The Secret Service remains the agency with the most experience, traditionally, when you talk about organizational knowledge to carry this forward. Responsible for the Pennsylvania State Police, I pledge that any and all support that we can give to keep all Pennsylvanians safe, which is what 6,400 civilian and enlisted Pennsylvania State Police show up every day to do, we will do. We want a robust republic, and we want to secure people's ability to express their views, and we have worked diligently and will continue to work diligently to make sure that that happens, sir.
Commissioner Paris, you are the thin blue line. Keeps us safe. Secret Service is an even thinner line. It keeps, in many ways, our democracy functioning, protecting us. They have to score 100%. They cannot let one bad thing happen as they did on the 13th. I want to make sure that we know that we give the Secret Service the ability to make those decisions when it comes to the safety of our candidates and elected officials. And for the third time, I'm going to repeat those words that were told to me by an individual, law enforcement individual on the ground when he said, Lou, who's in charge? Is it the campaign or is it the Secret Service? And I'd like to get to the bottom of that and make sure it's the Secret Service that's in charge. I don't know who is in charge, and I hope to God that we do find out. And I hope it's a Secret Service, and if it is a Secret Service, that reaffirm that they are in charge, because the buck stops somewhere, and it's got to be here. This committee, the government, with us in Congress. Gentlemen, thank you very much, and Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Colonel Paris and Mr. Yoes, I appreciate your patience in continuing through this questioning. And I would submit that I think your candor, Colonel Paris, has been very refreshing, and it paints a clear contrast from what was the testimony of the director of the Secret Service yesterday, who's now resigned. But her resignation doesn't resolve a thing. And in fact, the criminal investigation that your department is undertaking, that presumably Butler authorities may be involved in, FBI is undertaking, those don't really resolve anything. They affix criminal liability of someone who's presumably, if they acted alone, is dead. What is the most important issue is we have a national security crisis. We have right now, the only person who's been inactivated, as I understand it, is the sharpshooter who took the perp out. The people who made what appear to be unbelievably horrendous decisions. You can't even imagine. It boggles the mind, the decisions that were made. They're still in place. And we have multiple protectees moving around the country every day. And those same people, I don't even know if they've changed anything about what they're doing. Presumably you would think so, but we don't know that. So I think we need to learn as much as possible from you. I will say as a note of departure, I don't think, from what I've heard, you've made pretty clear the Pennsylvania State Police didn't do anything wrong. I don't know whether Butler County ESU might have done something wrong, so let me bear into that. Okay, all right. But it's clear to me as a bell that Secret Service, and that's, everyone's characterized it as a colossal failure because it's obvious to everyone concerned that that's the case. The two who were, I'm going to get one thing, I understand transpired while I was absent from the hearing for a bit. Do I understand that the two Butler ESU officers who one hoisted the other to the roof line where the crooks turned and leveled the rifle at him, those were two different ESU officers than the ones that originally spotted crooks from the second floor? Is that correct?
So just to be clear, my understanding is the two officers that responded and one hoisted up the second one were not part of Butler ESU. They were two separate municipal officers who were tasked with a different responsibility. I would speculate as an example to say a traffic post or a...
Understood.
And they responded. I don't know, again, the specifics as to how they were alerted, but just to be clear, they were two separate. Yes, sir.
Okay. The ESU, the Butler ESU officers who spotted Crooks. Do I understand correctly? They spotted him from the second floor of the AGR building.
That is my understanding, yes, sir.
Okay. Were they posted there in order to maintain overwatch on the roof, or were they generally assigned roving responsibility to be in the vicinity of that building?
I can't answer that, and I would defer to the Secret Service as to what the communication was and the assignment given.
Yeah, put that picture of the building up. I see that because I asked for it. I don't even know if I'll fit it in at this point. So that's, yeah, you see, so the Crooks was on the building directly facing the camera here, and you see the window open to the left. That's the second story of the AGR building where those ESU officers spotted Crooks, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Did they advise their senior, their command that they were departing that location to look for Crooks? Do you know that?
I do not know, sir.
Why did they stay away from that position for so long? If I understand correctly, the picture of Crooks was texted about 20, 25 minutes ahead of the shooting. Is that correct, first of all?
Could you ask me that one more time, sir? I just want to make sure, because this...
Was the picture of Crooks that they took, did they take that picture and send it to up into their command about 20, 25 minutes before the shooting?
What I want to be specific about is when the PSP member in the command post received it, and I believe that's in the vicinity of 20 to 25 minutes, with the caveat prior put on the record about a series of events, not a timeline minute by minute.
So you don't know whether they...
I don't specifically know. I believe the pictures of Crooks were taken at some point before that, when he was identified as being suspicious based on my prior testimony from the briefings that I had, because he was...
Okay, I get it. At least we've got a fairly long numbers of minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Why did they not return to that post? Do you know that?
I do not know, sir. My understanding is that there was a very concerted effort at that point to actively search and locate him and dispel that suspicion.
You mentioned that you have asked for, not received, I don't know what you call it, the site plan, but from the Secret Service has not been given to you. Has there been anything else that you've asked for in the course of your investigation that's been denied or made inaccessible to you other than the site plan?
Again, I want to be clear. No, I'm not aware of anything else that we've asked for, and we have not been denied. I just believe we haven't received it yet, so I want to make sure I'm not mischaracterizing that. We asked for it, and we have yet to receive it.
Yeah, we never get denied stuff. We just never get it. My time having expired, I recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lalotta.
Thank you, Chairman. Colonel, I want to reiterate the appreciation this committee has for your energy, your stamina, your focus, your candor. It's regrettable that some of our federal colleagues are not at the table with you today. We would have liked to extract for them some of the facts from 10 days ago. My colleagues from both sides of the aisle, I think, asked good, fair questions of you, and you gave good, fair, accurate responses to them that helps us understand July 13th a little more. It was only 10 days ago, and we're probably only in the infancy of that investigation of our oversight responsibilities, but you've provided us a lot. I want to use the remainder of my time to look forward. There's going to be a lot of conjecture about what happened and who's at fault, but putting that aside, we've talked about flaws that happened on July 13th, be it tactical flaws about communication, strategic ones like lack of drones, administrative ones like command and control and who has what authority, what are the rules of engagement. So I wanted to ask you, Colonel, and it's been said, Pennsylvania is going to have a number of more rallies, appearances, where the public is going to interact with presidential candidates from both sides of the aisle. What are you going to do? How are you going to assert yourself in your leadership role to reduce the likelihood of an incident like this, specifically with respect to tactics? We understand that radio communications were a weakness. Do you have a perspective on looking forward, how you might command your officers in a different manner to ensure that from a tactical perspective, specifically with communications, these events are held differently in the future, sir?
So yes, I will start with referring to the testimony of Congressman Luttrell about reinforcing and reiterating to try and mitigate any potential complacency. The Pennsylvania State Police maintains the Pennsylvania Criminal Intelligence Center. We're always trying to lean forward and glean as much criminal intelligence as we can, not only generated within the ranks of the Pennsylvania State Police, but our local partners, our county partners, and then through task force collaborations that we have with multiple federal agencies. I can tell you that we will not back away from the Secret Service We will lean forward to support them, and all of the resources of the Pennsylvania State Police will be brought to bear to keep Pennsylvanians and those visiting the Commonwealth safe.
Have you considered communications specifically? Different radios, training on those radios, other communications devices, be it digital or voice or whatever. Have you considered prospectively either acquiring new technology, implementing new training, or otherwise developing tactics that allow not only state and local to communicate better with each other, but also that communication to be shared more effectively with your federal partners?
I would say in the short term, coming up to the election, there's an extreme temporal component there that would make that difficult. Maintaining critical communications during any operation, be it an investigation of a traffic crash or a major investigation, a Cavalcante manhunt, an Eric Freen manhunt, a 95 bridge disaster, a derailment of a train on the border with Pennsylvania, a 6-hour running gun battle in Juniata County. We're always looking to get better, and communications that we maintain are a critical part of that. So I can commit that we will try to get better. If there is something that these future endeavors, which we've committed at the top of the testimony to be a part of, proves that we can be better, we're always looking every day to get better.
I know that members are allowed to, through the appropriations process, advocate for more resources to come to their state and local their state and local law enforcement partners for things like communications devices. I know that I've been able to lean into that process here, and I would sure that Mr. Kelly and others from the Pennsylvania delegation would endeavor to use federal funds to help augment your ability to increase your ability to communicate among each other and also with federal partners. I want to move to strategy, thinking a little more outside the bubble in the days and weeks leading up to an event. Colonel, do you have a sense on prospectively technology that you use like drones, other decisions you might make like stationing somebody on a nearby high vantage point like a water tower? You've heard some feedback from some informed members here today. Are those things helpful for you to plan moving forward to seize opportunities, both technological and physical, for events moving forward?
Short answer is yes. Our undercover assets and the surveillance and intelligence gathering is something we rely on heavily. We do have some drone capabilities that we're always looking to augment, but they're a phenomenal tool, and certainly their use will only expand into the future, probably long after my career and somebody who comes well after. But we're always looking to lean forward and do the job better, sir.
And I think what I heard, Colonel, from the totality of the interactions today was administrative issues, issues related to command and control, rules of engagement, who thought they had what authority, who thought they had to call somebody to do something. Colonel, do we have your commitment that you'll lean as far forward as possible and essentially command my negation, that you'll do everything that was within your power until you're told to stop to ensure the safety of presidential candidates?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I yield.
Gentleman yields back, and Chairman Green's going to return momentarily, so I want to keep the hearing going pending his return. And I've got a few more questions, and so I will call a third round of questioning. And let me then recognize myself for 5 minutes. Colonel Paris, did you say? I think I heard you say in the course of the hearing that you believe Mr. Crooks fired 8 shots, and that 8 shell casings were recovered. Did I hear that?
Yes.
Okay. Were they all recovered in the vicinity of his body?
I'm told that they were.
When the information, let's see, the information concerning having identified Crooks as a suspicious figure was relayed, and the text message was sent to the Secret Service Command Center. PSP was present, I understand. Is that correct?
The PSP member who received those from Butler ESU?
That's what I want to clarify first. Was it a PSP member who received that text?
So I can comment that it was a PSP member who received that from Butler ESU.
And passed it and then advised Secret Service?
Immediately advised Secret Service and then passed it at their direction
to a telephone number, texted the information to a telephone number.
That's what I was briefed.
That was given by the Secret Service representative. Did the Secret Service representative indicate to whom that connected? Who was being sent the information via that number?
I do not know. Our understanding was from an interview that we conducted that it was some sort of tactical asset of the Secret Service.
Was there any comment or discussion in the command center about the advisability of keeping the president off the stage until the matter was resolved, either at that moment or later?
I do not know, and I would only underscore what I said before, the distinction between suspicion versus a threat. At that point, I think concerning, but it was still, the perspective at the time was suspicious and not yet a threat.
How did, so the information was relayed from ESU officers to a PSP officer. Do I understand that correct?
Yes.
Did ESU have command officers in the command center?
That was asked earlier, and like I said, I received a briefing that my understanding was that there were Butler County representatives in the command post, but I cannot definitively tell you from any briefings that I've had who and when they were there.
Do you have any insight why the Butler ESU officers transmitted that information to a PSP representative rather than to a Butler ESU representative in the command center?
I understand that there was, the Butler ESU person from whom it came and the PSP member to whom it was sent they essentially knew one another.
Was there any mechanism in place to monitor the location presence of the ESU officers who were at the second floor window and departed from there to go look for crooks? Was that any kind of communication ongoing in the command center with that, about that?
I don't know.
Right. Is that a regular practice in PSP operations to have someone monitoring the location, presence, posting, absence from posts of members of your force?
I would say in general, you need to know where your assets are deployed, but I would also say, depending on what the prior rules of engagement are, there may be a situation that could realistically, outside of the example we're discussing today, that we would expect our people to make a decision in the immediate moment to address another issue.
All right, I yield back and recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, gentlemen, thank you for being here. Something Mr. LaLota said that I want to emphasize and underline, which is, gentlemen, I hope you lean forward when it comes to making decisions, making what your gut tells you is the right decision when you're out there trying to protect American lives, especially those of candidates. The situation is an interesting one because in this committee, we have been talking about domestic terrorism as being a bigger threat to the United States than foreign terrorism. And I would imagine, based on the facts that we know them today, this is a domestic individual that God knows what motivated him to do what he's doing. He was looking up information according to what I've read. He was looking up both Democrat and Republican candidates. God knows what set him off or where he was going, or what targets he was really focused on other than possibly the opportunity. This is not good news because this is essentially a lone wolf, it would appear, that just, God knows what motivated him. And I'm bringing this up because, Mr. Yost, you represent thousands of police officers in this country. A lot of them doing the job to the best of their abilities. And yet these are challenges that are very hard to take on. How do you, based on what your officers say out there, what is it that we can do to make your job better? What is it that we can do to begin to get a grip on these lone wolf attacks that are domestically motivated and grown?
Well, sir, I'm not too sure I have an easy answer for you on that one. I will tell you that we live in extraordinary times right now where we've gone from talking to people to talking at people. And I think what you see over a period of time, this is eroded to a part where I think through social media or whatever events, we built a community around our own belief systems. And I think that in some ways is what empowers some people who act out on things. We may never understand why some people take the actions they do. I think we're just in some extraordinary times with so much hate in our country. And that's across the board. As a law enforcement officer, we went through that period of time of the dehumanization of law enforcement. It certainly took a toll on us as a profession. I'll give you some examples of how dangerous it is to be a police officer right now. Last year, there were 378 officers that were shot in the line of duty. 60 died. And the number of ambush attacks on law enforcement officers were over 100. That's last year. This year, already, the first 6 months, we're at 200 officers have been shot in the line of duty.
Last year?
Last year was 376.
And this year we're at?
This year we're at 200 just in the first 6 months. So we're on par, or it will exceed what last year's been. There's just so much hatred in our country right now, and I think that I agree with the statements made by pretty much everyone in this room. We need to turn the rhetoric down. I think it's not serving to anyone. The hatred that we have across this country is permeating into everything we have, and that's everybody owns a little bit of responsibility with it. We need to focus on finding solutions to problems rather than blaming others for what the problems are. I know that that's not your question, but I think it.
Well, actually, you are answering my question, sir.
I'm sorry, what?
You are answering my question.
Yeah, so what can be done, sir? We really need to turn the rhetoric down. We need to recognize that in reality, this is the reality when it comes to law enforcement. The majority of violent crime in this country is committed by a small percentage of people. And when we're able to separate them from the people that they prey on, we impact crime. We struggle in this country because law enforcement officers are doing their job to try and separate that. But I think our system has just so many layers in it that shows that it's fractured. And we really need to get back to the real business of protecting the people we serve. That's the end of the day, that's what's most important. And so we live in some extraordinary times. I look at what happened here on the political stage. It doesn't surprise me because this has been happening across our country, across a number of individuals.
Commissioner Harris, any thoughts?
I would just say that we endeavor to try and be the most professional that we can to earn that respect every day. I think every encounter of the millions of calls of service that troopers answer across 45,000 square miles of the Commonwealth is an opportunity to establish that relationship and be professional and do the right thing. And that's what I think, sometimes the more complex the problem, the more simple the solution in terms of keeping our focus on being professionals, doing the right thing at the right time, and showing up every day and earning it.
If I conclude by saying that thank you for your service to our country and to our communities, keeping us safe, and consider us, I think I can speak for everybody up here, consider us partners of yours. Work with us, talk to us, not at us, but with us, so we can figure out how to solve some of these issues. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My time is up.
Gentleman yields back, and all time having expired in the second round of questioning, I would yield to the ranking member for a closing statement if you have one, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do, and again, to repeat myself, thanks our witnesses for being here today, and I want to thank our chairman for calling this most important hearing. July 13th was a tragedy. Can't let it happen again. And that's why we're here today, oversight to get the facts. And I believe that we have started getting some facts. A whole lot more work to be done, but we're going in that direction. We do have a lot of questions for the Secret Service, for local law enforcement. And as Mr. Ivey said, the locals didn't get a lot of notice when it came to this campaign event for a presidential candidate. We need to do better. The American public is relying on us to get some answers. They want to make sure that, that we're doing the best we can. to guard our democracy by guarding our candidates to office. And as we get closer to the November election, like you both have said, we got to watch the rhetoric. We got to tone it down. And I've heard those words in this committee. Right after January 6th, we echoed those same words from both sides. Tone it down, folks. And we're still there. We can do better. We can do better for this country, for our democracy. And we need to again set an example for the rest of the world. All of us together, we can do this. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I yield.
I thank the gentleman, and I'm going to give the chairman's closing statement for him, but it's prepared here, and I think that is the appropriate way to end. Before I do that, I want to say thank you to the witnesses, especially Colonel Paris. I will say that in the North Carolina Highway Patrol is an institution in my state that I have not, until I had occasion to serve in the legislature and then subsequently run for Congress and serve districts that have constantly changed in North Carolina, and I have seen institutionally how the State Highway Patrol has then fed the sheriff's offices over the course of time with the elected sheriffs who've come up in that institution. And I don't know that much about your organization, but you remind me of the fine men and women of the North Carolina Highway Patrol, and I really do appreciate your candor. Tomorrow, the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, will be testifying before the Judiciary Committee, on which I also serve. And I hope he'll be candid. I believe there are moments when the sanctity of criminal investigations needs to be tempered by the fact that the nation needs answers to a national security crisis, as I suggested before. You have been candid while still protecting the sanctity of the investigations that are ongoing, or of which your agency is a part, and I appreciate that very much. So during this hearing, we got the news that Director Cheatle resigned. After refusing to give straightforward answers to Congress and the American people about the Secret Service's failures on July 13, seeing the chairman return, I'm going to pause and let him give his statement, which I had commenced.
You are closing for me there? However necessary as it was, Director Cheatle's indisputably overdue resignation is only the first step on the path to accountability and reform. Today's hearing was a vital step in obtaining more information about what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, but Congress has a lot of work ahead of us. I think today, as we've questioned these professionals who've served their communities and their states for their lifetime, we've discovered a lot of facts, particularly about the operation. Yesterday when we were on the site, we learned about the planning failures. Today we've learned about conducts of the operation failures, communications and things like that, people moving and maybe not notifying, those kinds of things. Secret Service making a decision to not stop the president when a guy's using a rangefinder and is described as suspicious looking. I just boggles the mind. We're going to continue to investigate the failures of the Secret Service. Our mission is very clear. We've got to get to the bottom of it. This can't ever happen again. I want to thank both of you for serving and for a very long testimony today. Thanks for sticking around and letting us. We're going to have lots of other people come in here, and we're going to get granular on all of this stuff. But this is the closest that anyone's come to taking the life of a president or a presidential candidate in over 4 decades. It can never happen again. It just simply cannot. So we're going to continue our fact-finding to figure out exactly how it happened, much like a after-action review would. Identify all those areas and ensure that Secret Service, whomever steps up to take that leadership role now does so and addresses these things. Again, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. And if there are members, what often happens in our committee hearing, they'll have questions that come to them. They have a few days to generate written questions. Would you be open to us sending those to you and you just send a letter back with the answers in writing? Okay, thank you. I appreciate the affirmative nods. Again, thanks for being here. And I think both sides of the aisle did an amazing job. And you made some closing comments, Mr. Gray. Did you get a chance to? Okay, I'm sure. I'm sorry I missed them. I'm sure they were.
Second shot, I can repeat myself.
I'll go watch the tape. The committee stands adjourned.
I thought I just picked up because, like, you know, leave your bag somewhere. Thank you.
30 years, the first since the Brady Bill that I led as a member of Congress back in the 1990s, and I remember working then with Senator Biden on gun legislation, both the assault weapons ban and the Brady Law. With President Biden, we enacted the boldest clean energy bill in the history of our nation, the Inflation Reduction Act. Because of this bill, our kids will breathe cleaner air. Our communities will see less pollution. The next generation will enjoy millions of new, good-paying green jobs that will last for generations, jobs with a future. With President Biden, we revived America's grand tradition of scientific research and technological innovation. With the CHIPS and Science Act, advanced manufacturing is coming back to America, to cities like Syracuse and Albany, but also in states like Arizona and Ohio and Idaho and Texas and so many others. And with President Biden, America's led the free world to defend democracy in its hour of need. He united the nations of NATO to stand with the people of Ukraine against Vladimir Putin. And NATO is stronger and larger today than it was when he took office. Incredibly, Mr. President, there is still much, much more. President Biden led the way in appointing the first black woman to ever serve on the Supreme Court, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. I worked with him and my colleagues here in the Senate, I thank so many of them, to confirm more than 200 federal judges, the most diverse slate of judicial and federal nominees America has ever seen. We worked with him on our historic veterans' health reform. We expanded federal protections for marriage equality. All this and more. Truly, President Biden's legislative accomplishments are without equal in our recent history. Of course, the work is not done. This is not a moment of culmination because we have a lot of work left to do. For everything that has transpired these past few weeks, one thing has not changed. Senate Democrats will continue working with President Biden, with Vice President Harris, and with the entire Biden-Harris administration to make life better. And it was so typical of the president when he called me to tell me the news that he was not running again. He said, but we have a lot more work to do over the next several months. It shows you the commitment of the man to making the lives of people better. So we will continue to work on those issues, but for now, I want to say, for a grateful nation, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Joseph Robinette Biden. What an amazing legacy President Biden will leave for future generations. History will say at this moment, here was one of our great American presidents. He's a leader who made the most difficult choice at the most important moment because he believed it was the right thing to do. Here is someone who put country ahead of self until the very end. Now on Cosa Copa. When you're a parent, there's no greater pain imaginable than the pain of losing a child, or in my case, I might say a grandchild as well. We all think of it almost every day when we have kids, when we have grandkids. What if they're gone somehow? How would we even go forward? My kids are now adults and having kids of their own. But I remember when they were little, nothing mattered more to me than keeping them safe. As parents, that's what we want to do. Keep our kids safe as much as we can, to shield them from the harms they're too young to handle, and to ensure we as a country guard against those who would prey or exploit or otherwise harm our loved ones. I feel this way as strongly as ever as a grandparent when I think of my 3 beautiful grandchildren, Noah, who's age 5, Eleanor, who's age 2, and Henry, who's age 1. Unlike decades past, ensuring our kids' safety today means ensuring their online safety, to protect kids from online bullying and exploitation and other risks to their mental health. Social media has helped hundreds of millions of people to connect in new ways over the last 2 decades, but there are also new and sometimes serious health risks that come along with those benefits. We cannot set these risks aside. On this issue, we desperately need to catch up. So, this week, I'm proud to say, the Senate will vote on kids' online safety. For the information of senators, I'm announcing that this week the Senate will take up 2 bipartisan bills to protect our kids while they use the internet: the Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA, and the Children and Teens Online Protection Act, or COPPA. Today, I will move to lay a message before the Senate that I intend to use as a vehicle for the substance of those two bills. Members should prepare for a cloture vote on the message as soon as Thursday. Passing kids' online safety, Mr. President, as we all know, as you know, has been months in the making. This has been a long and bumpy road, but one thing I always knew for sure, it would be worth it. I've worked closely with members on both sides of the aisle to get the bills ready for the floor. Senators Blumenthal and Blackburn, Markey and Cassidy, and so many others. I made sure on both sides that members on both sides had plenty of time to offer their input, work through disagreements, and arrive at a consensus. And now, after months of hard work, the moment to act has arrived, and the Senate should pass these bills swiftly. And nothing has galvanized me and so many others of us here in the Senate more to act on kids' online safety than meeting with parents who've lost loved ones. Over the past month, I've met with many parents from New York and from around the country whose kids took their own lives because of what happened to them on social media. Some of these kids were bullied, others were targeted by predators or had their personal private information stolen. Practically all of them suffered deep mental health anguish in some way and felt like they had nowhere to turn. And in far too many cases, their suffering ended in tragedy as they took their own lives. I can't comprehend the pain these parents have felt. No one would fault them if they hid away, if mourned their children away from the spotlight and processed their grief in private. But the parents I've met are amazing. They've done the opposite. Instead of retreating into darkness, they lit a candle. They worked doggedly to ensure other parents don't have to endure the pain they did. I just was talking to one of the New York parents who was here, and that's what she said. It so touched me. I want to make sure what happened to my child doesn't happen to others. These parents made their children's memory into a blessing that now bears fruit in the form of legislation that will prevent other kids from meeting the same terrible fate. So for me, this effort's personal. To every senator who's been a parent, it's personal. And when I talk to parents who've lost their children, I see the pictures of their kids. I think of my kids when they were little. I think of my grandchildren today. The loss shatters your heart. And I think to myself that if we could get these bills done, it would do so much good for millions of families across the country. So we're going to get this done. We are going to get this done. I thank the senators who have labored tirelessly on these bills, especially Blumenthal and Blackburn for their work on COSA, Markey and Cassidy for COPPA, and Chair Cantwell for her excellent leadership on the Commerce Committee. I look forward to voting on advancing COSA and COPPA here on the floor later this week. Yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Ms. Baldwin. Republican leader.
I ask consent that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Since the Senate last convened, our nation has seen 2 attempts to circumvent the American people's right to choose their leaders. The first, of course, was the first time in more than a century that a former president of the United States was shot in an attempted assassination. That happened to Theodore Roosevelt. This murderous assault on our democratic process very nearly robbed millions of Americans of their choice for the next president. It's been reassuring to see Americans united in their horror at this brazen act of political violence. The near disaster on July 13th violated the trust of the American public, and restoring that trust will require transparency and accountability. I said at the outset that the resignation of the Director of Secret Service would be an important step in that direction. And I'm encouraged she's taken that step today. The director is on record describing her agent's responsibilities as, quote, a zero-fail mission, end quote. Clearly, on July 13th, the Secret Service did fail the mission. The important questions now are why and how, apart from internal inquiries and FBI investigations, Congress Oversight Authority entitles us to answers. Yesterday, the House Oversight Committee spent hours questioning the Director of the Secret Service. Unfortunately, the Senate majority hasn't yet showed any intention of conducting oversight of its own. Democrats who so often express concern about threats to democracy have yet to look seriously at the failures of the Secret Service. The Judiciary Committee, for its part, appeared to be more concerned with resurrecting failed judicial nominations than in getting to the bottom of the first near assassination of a former president in 100 years. Until earlier today, Chairman Durbin apparently intended to spend the committee's time taking another look at radical Judge Sarah Netburn, a nominee his own committee rejected once for engaging in political activism from the bench and lying about her actions under oath. It's crickets at the Homeland Security Committee as well. Chairman Peters has 3 meetings on the calendar for this week, but not one about the near assassination of a former president. The former president of the United States came within an inch of his life just days ago. An innocent participant in the great tradition of American campaigns was killed, and 2 other attendees were seriously wounded. The American people deserve to know how this happened and what steps are being taken to ensure that it won't happen again. Fortunately, a despicable act of political violence failed, but just 2 days ago, a different decision succeeded in erasing the will of millions of American voters. Leading Washington Democrats prevailed upon President Biden to toss out primary results and leave the nomination in limbo, while party bosses anoint another candidate. One thing is for certain, if they formally nominate President Biden's preferred successor, the choice facing working Americans remains the same. Vice President Harris owns this administration's record. Her fingerprints are all over the past 4 years of failure. She's cast tie-breaking votes for radical judicial nominees, for soft-on-crime prosecutors, and for the reckless spending her party's top economists actually condemned. She's floated her responsibilities as the administration's border czar and provided over the worst border crisis in American history. The American people cannot afford 4 more years of open borders, violent crime, or historic inflation. In November, they may well reject it. Now, on another matter, tomorrow the Capitol will welcome Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the democratically elected leader of America's closest ally in the Middle East, to address a joint meeting of Congress for the 4th time. It's a pivotal moment for the U.S.-Israel alliance and for Israel's war against savage Iran-backed terrorists. This is an existential conflict for Israel, but it's also a test of America's reliability and a challenge to the entire free world. I look forward to hearing Prime Minister's remarks. Unfortunately, some of the leaders who could learn the most from the experience of the battle-tested, duly elected leader of a foreign democracy apparently will not be among us. The Vice President, who traditionally presides over joint sessions of Congress, apparently can't spare the time to demonstrate even symbolic support for the only democracy in the Middle East. Of course, Israel deserves more than symbolism. It deserves the time, space, and material support to guarantee its security and defeat the terrorists who started this war. But no matter how many times I say it, no matter how many of our colleagues affirm Israel's right to exist, no matter how sternly the President insists that his commitment to Israel is ironclad, America's actions actually speak otherwise. The administration's policy toward Israel has often compounded the challenges our ally faces. It has withheld critical military assistance and tried to micromanage Israel's military operations. Washington Democrats have struggled to forcefully condemn the scourge of anti-Semitism and terrorist sympathy running rampant across university campuses and throughout the American left. Instead, they've indulged the mob, engaging in grotesquely hypocritical efforts to meddle in Israel's domestic politics and call for the removal of its democratic elected leader. And this is just in the past 9 months. But the Commander-in-Chief's failure to deter enemies of Israel and America is a debacle years in the making. The chaos fomented by Iran and its proxies across the Middle East is no surprise when you consider the siege this administration has sown. Desperation to return to a failed nuclear deal told Iran that once again held leverage over America. Rescinding the Houthis' terrorist designation told Iran-backed groups that America isn't serious about imposing consequences for their savage violence. A humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan invited allies and adversaries alike to question America's competence and America's resolve. Failure to respond decisively to Iran-backed strikes against American personnel, interests, and partners across the region told the world's most active state sponsor of terror that the world's only superpower was unwilling to act like one. Today, America and our partners are reaping the consequences of the Biden administration's weakness. This weekend's deadly strike in Tel Aviv was the latest in more than 200 Houthi attacks on Israeli soil since October 7th. It is merely a coincidence that this attack landed just yards from a U.S. diplomatic facility. The same terrorists are holding global commerce hostage in the Red Sea and happily trading $1,000 drones for $1 million U.S. Navy interceptors. They've concluded correctly, it seems that waging war on America and our interests is a low-cost proposition. And this isn't the calculus of some autonomous terrorist. We're talking about a campaign coordinated by the master terrorist in Tehran. As one Hezbollah field commander told a reporter recently, quote, "The Iranians want us to escalate, so we are escalating. The Iranians control every bullet we have. The sworn enemies of the great Satan and the little Satan are emboldened. They're wreaking havoc on America and Israel for pennies on the dollar. And they're working with Russia, China, and North Korea to challenge the American-led order all around the world. Just as core U.S. interests are at stake in Russia's war against Ukraine, they're at stake in the Middle East as well. Tomorrow, as on numerous occasions in our history, Congress will hear from a close friend of America on the front lines against this global effort to undermine the American-led order.